I might need a glass of water, yeah, just in case I start choking.
Oh, you do? Okay. Oh,
Oh,
there we go.
Taylor's actually wearing a jacket and tie.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Whoa, what is up with that?
Do you want this, Stuart? Do you want that?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, you got it for you.
But then where do I put it? Is there something underneath the podium?
Let's see.
Yeah.
What we could do.
That's good. That's good.
Just make sure you don't tilt down.
Just
and
don't
get
go,
this.
don't go that way, right?
Is that an app or is it just the website?
You should be able to just go to the website and then log in. Darryl, can you tilt your shot down?
This one?
Close up.
Oh, it's just.
And don't go off the backdrop.
Oh.
Probably need to hold on to the pillar all the time.
Well, yeah, I just moved it for whenever I'm doing it.
How's that shot?
Okay, so you don't want me to get outside of the.
Right, don't go past. Yeah, it goes off into the void.
Okay,
We
need
are
this.
about 10 minutes out.
All right.
I'm gonna balance this.
Yeah, I am.
This is just like Sunrise Semester. Did you ever watch those?
Yeah.
Really boring stuff. Ah.
Is it close up like that okay? Or is it close up?
No, that's fine. This is actually a medium shot.
But it's closer than the white shirt, so
You
that's
do,
what I
we do a cowboy shot. You know what a cowboy is?
Okay, what should-
No, it's from the saddle.
From the what?
The saddle.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Taylor?
Internet confusion on the laptop.
Oh, we do?
You gotta watch it on the phone this time instead.
Okay.
So this is what they're seeing right now.
So can somebody do it on their laptop or?
No.
Okay, so they have to do it on their phone.
Other people can watch it from their laptops
Okay.
and stuff. It's just our laptop where we monitor from.
Ah, I got you.
Yeah,
Okay.
so everything that they'll see, I'll see on here now. So
Okay,
Uh,
good deal.
there's a little bit of noise on here. There's a little bit of background noise. Not a lot.
Oh, because, yeah. Yeah, just pull it down to, just pull the master down to like 2. I should probably put my microphone on there.
to mute it again.
Yes, yeah. Can you get a level for Theo? Just put it right here. That's fine. It should be the wide shot. Okay. Talk first, Theo.
Can you hear me now?
Cool. All right. And then
We don't really want you to move down. Don't go up there.
no, leave the master down.
Oh, shoot. Let's see. Guillermo, where's the mute at on here again? The mute button on here?
It is right over.
Doesn't seem where it was. Where was that last time?
I think it's.
You asked Terry.
I don't know. Hey,
Yeah, I can get it.
Terry. Where? How do you mute it?
I'm not seeing it where I remember it from last time. It is that little guy? Oh, okay. I guess it probably does say mute. A little bit, yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, so go ahead and mute now then.
Okay, is my mic on now?
Taylor, why don't you take him through the opening sequence?
Okay, so
Oh, you're going to be up here?
I'll
Okay.
do a quick introduction.
Okay.
Very brief, and then you take over, and I'll just Terry. You want me to just walk straight off that way, or around, or?
Yeah, just straight up is fine. We'll just
Okay.
we'll go to the close-up. Actually, what you could do is switch sides and
Okay.
walk off to your left and then around behind. Make sure you go behind the camera.
And don't trip or crash.
A slow fall. Okay.
And you want to be much closer together than that.
Okay.
Pretty awkwardly close usually is how it goes.
All right.
Yeah.
It's got about a minute lag or so.
Why don't you go ahead and mute your phone?
Yours.
I don't have my phone.
Oh,
No, the
Oh,
microphone.
the microphone.
No.
Oh.
Your phone.
This one.
Yeah. Your.
Oh, phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to volume
Let's go ahead and go to.
Okay, that should, for now.
So I'm not going to hear my voice with a lag, am I?
No.
Okay.
That'd be really confusing.
Yeah, really would. Who is that guy? He's really annoying.
Let's see. So
Talking.
I'll do a brief introduction. I'll walk off, and then I'll be able to see comments and stuff if anyone does have a question.
Okay?
We haven't typically had many questions in the past, so it's not unusual to not have any.
I don't think we'll have any today, but unless I say something really, really controversial, I could do that.
See who's watching out there.
Yeah. Great. Just,
Let's see, and then at the end, I'll come up and thank you, and then we'll shake hands, and we
Okay.
usually wait about 5 or 10 seconds while it turns off, and then we're all set.
okay, fair enough.
Here you go.
And could both of you move to your left, like half step, right in there?
Good?
Perfect. It's behind the scenes.
We usually start just after 12, because that's
Okay.
when people get the links all set up and
For about
everything.
3 minutes out, speaking about a couple of minutes after 12.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we'll start with a wide shot for the introduction. Then we'll go to a close-up of Dr. Dorsey while you are making your way around. And as soon as he clears, you can go and you can start your talk.
Fair enough.
See, Taylor says she can hear us and it sounds awkward.
Well, she should stop texting.
Sounds awkward. What do you mean by that?
Just that there's not anything else going on. It's just our comments every now and then, I guess.
Ah, okay.
So,
Well, I promise we'll talk. I'll say something. No long silences.
All right, you're 1 minute out. I'm gonna lose this mic here. Still see? Can you see my hand here?
Yeah.
you got your water? Good.
Got it. Yeah.
And we're 30 seconds.
Why don't you
and
pass me the
need
water?
Silence from here.
There you go. Thanks.
Mhm.
Stand by 5. And go.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the semester's final installment of the Dr. Deborah Hedinger Alumni Faculty Lecture Series. With me today, we have our special guest lecturer, TLU President Dr. Stuart Dorsey.
Taylor,
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey.
good to be with you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Texas Lutheran University. First, I want to say that I'm proud to give a lecture named for one of TLU's most respected professors, Dr. Deb Hedinger. She modeled TLU's most important values. She was all about supporting student success and inspirational teaching. And I was glad that I was able to know and work with her a bit. My field is labor economics, and within that, my specialty is labor economics. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of topics in the labor market today. In my background, I worked at the U.S. Department of Labor as a research economist, and most of my work has been in private pensions and retirement studies. I've also taught labor economics many times at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. So this lecture gives me a chance to return to an area where at least I can claim some expertise. And I chose a couple of topics that I hope are topical and interesting to those of you that are watching. I want to look at two major trends that are afoot in the U.S. labor market today. The first is the growth in non-firm-based employment, or what many people call the gig economy. The second is the surprising and dramatic decline in workforce participation of so-called prime age males, that is, men aged 25 to 54. In both of these, I'll present some data describing the trends and offer some theories about why these are happening, and then discuss implications for the future of the economy and work in the U.S. Let's talk about the gig economy first. First, what is the gig economy? Well, that refers to employment arrangements where the worker and firm do not have a durable job attachment. Workers are apt to work for several employers over the course of a year, patching together a series of short-lived jobs, or what are known as gigs. Now, these consist of several different categories. One are temporary agency workers. or a second is contract workers. These are workers that are contracted out by a third party to the firms they ultimately work for. A third are now on-call workers. That is, they have no set hours, but they are on call, let's say with a restaurant, to come in depending upon what demand is at that particular time. And the fourth are independent contractors or consultants or so-called freelancers that are doing stringing together gigs. In the gig economy, employment, the basic idea is employment is on a short-term basis as opposed to having a permanent job with a single employer. Now, the data suggests that this is a fast-growing part of the labor market. In 2005, approximately 10% of the U.S. workforce were in these kinds of temporary work arrangements. By 2015, that number has increased to 16%. So 1 in 6 workers is involved in the gig economy. In contrast, leading up to 2005, there was no change. So this all really took off as of about 2005. Within that, the largest increase was workers whose services were contracted out by another company. That went from about 0.5% to a little over 3%. Freelancers went from 6.9% to 8.4% in 2015. There's been a lot of attention attracted by freelancers using an online platform that is working for Uber or TaskRabbit or some of the other apps that are online. Data suggests that that's small, less than about 1% of the workforce is engaged in these kinds of activities, but it's also growing rapidly as far as we can tell. Another separate survey suggests that a lot more workers are involved in the so-called gig economy on a casual basis or basically moonlighting. About 1 in 3 workers has had some kind of temporary work over the past year. So why has this taken off? Why the growth in these temporary work arrangements? Well, certainly the Great Recession has had an impact. We always see self-employment going up in a recession as workers get laid off and then they turn to self-employment as a substitute. But then when the recession ends, that tends to go away. Right now, because we've been a long time coming out of the recession, it's a little too early for us to be able to tell how much of this shift has been due to the cyclical factors of the labor market and that those factors that will eventually disappear. But certainly much of the change is structural or permanent. That is going to be with us and probably increasing. A major factor, of course, has been technology. Uber, TaskRabbit, Airbnb, these could not exist without an online platform. So technology has enabled them. Your smartphone, the ability to have an app for these things allows those work arrangements to be possible. Technology also has made it much easier to work in your home without having to go to a centralized workforce and to work outside of normal hours, normal 8 to 5 hours. So certainly the growth of technology has made these work arrangements more possible. So how does that affect workers? How does that affect firms? Well, let's look at the workers' side first, the workers' perspective, or the supply side. It provides flexibility, so that's the benefit of that. I was just reading on an airplane recently in Southwest Air Magazine. They were talking about millennials and millennial parenting. And one of the ideas was that millennial parents are more likely to want to stay home and the ability to piece together these gigs or to work on part-time jobs allows millennial parents to stay at home with the children that they're very interested in and yet continue to work by freelancing. In the past, what we've tended to see are particularly females. They would have to drop out of the labor force, drop out of a job, quit a full-time job, stay at home, raise the children, then they might come back into the labor force. And so the ability to freelance, the ability to piece together temporary jobs while working at home clearly is going to be an advantage for parents generally, for millennial parents. Others, you don't have to be parents to prefer that kind of work arrangements. Work hard and play hard. A friend of mine who was decided to go into economic consulting a while back said, Stuart, what happens is that when you got work, you work very hard, and then when the contract runs out, you don't have work, you go fishing. And he liked that kind of lifestyle, and that was beneficial for him. There are also benefits to employers of these more temporary associations. When you have full-time employment, when workers are permanently attached to jobs, the employer bears the risk of fluctuation in demand. So what has traditionally happened is that when you go into a recession, firms will keep much of their permanent workforce, even though there's less work for them to do, and then they'll be less productive during that recession. They keep them because they've got investments in those workers. There is training, and they don't want to lose those workers by laying them off. And so employers, in effect, bear the cost during a recession, bear the risk of a recession and lower productivity. Many firms now have switched to contract workers so that when they need workers, when the demand is there, they're able to hire them, bring them on, and then when there's less demand, they're no longer attached to these workers because they work for a third party. It's easier to let them go. Well, clearly this shifts the risk of fluctuating demand of a recession from the firm to the worker. Policy changes may also play a role in the growth of the gig economy, short-term employment. Take the Affordable Care Act. That increased the requirements for firms to provide health care benefits to full-time employees. Many argue that encouraged firms to change to temporary work arrangements, temporary less than full-time work arrangements, and so on the demand side, that increased the demand for temporary workers. On the supply side, however, the increased availability of health insurance, not through an employer, through these exchanges, would make it more possible for someone to be self-employed, to be a consultant, to be an independent consultant, and to work and still be able to get health insurance. So those kinds of policy changes may also have had an impact. Well, what does this all mean for the future of work in America for workers and firms? Well, there are going to be some benefits and some costs. On the positive side, increased flexibility that technology enables is going to allow workers to be more likely to achieve that very much desired work-life balance. Okay, so it's no longer going to be you need to be working 40 hours a week or plus overtime, whatever is required. Workers will have more choice enabled by technology. Other workers, however, are going to prefer the certainty of a permanent job arrangement. Is that going to go away? Well, no, it's not going to go away because as the labor market gets tighter and tighter, and I expect that's going to happen as the baby boomers move into retirement, and there's a much smaller cohort of millennials moving up, the terms of trade are going to be shifting to employees. So firms are going to be trying to compete with each other for talent. When you've got workers that want a permanent job and they want benefits associated with that, those firms will compete to get the best talent by offering what employees want. So I think what's going to happen is that you're going to just see more choice. You're going to have the option of freelancing, working on your own, and enjoying the flexibility that provides, or other workers much preferring the certainty of a permanent job and the income that provides. They're going to demand that, and they're going to be able to find those jobs. Those permanent jobs we're not going to have an economy where everybody is freelancing and permanent employment goes away. The gig economy provides more choices, and I think that is unambiguously a good thing. I would also say that what we're seeing now is really just a continuation of a trend that began decades ago with the reduction in long-term employment. So we have seen the likelihood that workers would join a particular firm and stay there over their entire career and have a defined benefit pension that cements that. That all started disappearing decades ago. And so this, I think, is just a continuation of that trend of reducing that attachment of workers and firms, where presumably that just isn't as valuable as it was, say, in the 1960s or the 1970s. I don't think it's all bad news. There's the Decay Economy. You read an article about it, it's great. You'll read other articles about it, it says it's terrible because workers are working too hard and they're not getting benefits. Ultimately, what is happening here is that technology has benefits, it has productivity benefits, and those benefits are going to be shared by workers and firms, in my view. So that's a good thing. Now, in contrast, the other labor market trend I want to discuss is pretty much all bad news. This is the withdrawal from the labor market of prime age males, men aged 25 to 54. Until fairly recently, the labor force participation rate of men in this category was pretty darn near 100%. That is, your typical 40-year-old male was either working, had a job, or was unemployed, which meant that he was looking for work. The other category possibility is you can be just out of the labor force, which means that you're neither employed, but you're not looking for a job either. You're out of the labor force. In 1957, the labor force participation rate was 97%. That is 97% of all males 25 to 54 either had a job or they were actively looking for work. They were unemployed, looking to become employed. Today that's fallen to 88%, a pretty substantial decline over a relatively short period of time. So right now, 1 in 8 of men of that age group is out of the labor force. A recent book by Nicholas Eberhardt is called Men Without Work, America's Invisible Crisis. And he puts it this way, that traditionally there's just been two ways, or two options for men. You were either working or you're out there looking for work. And now, as he puts it, there is a, quote, third way, and that is to be idle time. Now, this trend is not just the result of the recession. Yes, labor force participation rates do tend to fall during a recession. So particularly the workers are so-called discouraged. They may want a job, they drop out of the labor market, but then when the labor market comes back, when demand comes back, they go back into the labor market. It's not just a product of that. It's been happening well before the Great Recession, and it looks like it's not likely to, that trend is not likely to reverse itself now that the economy is growing and the unemployment rate has gone down. Moreover, the trend is much stronger in the U.S. than the rest of the industrialized world, which is a surprise because our labor force participation rates tend to be higher in the U.S. than in other industrialized countries. But Japan and Germany and the U.K. all have substantially higher participation rates for men in that category, prime age males, than does the U.S. at this time. Okay, well, what are the characteristics? What makes it more likely for someone to be out of the labor force if you're in that category? Well, strongly less educated. That makes that's an important factor. Never married may even be the largest factor. So males that have never married are much less likely to be in the labor force. African American males, but marriage particularly appears to be very important. That is, black married men are more likely to be in the labor force than are white men who are unmarried. Another interesting variation is by immigration status. So education is important, but immigrants who were high school dropouts are more likely to be in the labor force than native-born Americans who are college graduates. And that's a pretty substantial, pretty interesting result. So why has this happened? What's going on? Why aren't these men in the labor force? Well, there are actually a number of theories, so we're not able to say yet with certainty all that's going on, but here are some ideas that have been put forth, all of which have some empirical backing for them. For one is low skills, low wages. Okay, we know that over the past couple of decades, of course, less skilled jobs always pay lower wages, but that has increased in severity over the last couple of decades. So if you have lower skills, your wages have really lagged over the past couple of decades as technology has taken over. In effect, that means that men are looking at the less skilled, less educated men are looking at jobs that are available and saying, you know, it's just not worth it to go to work. Okay, that's one idea. A second is increased incarceration rates for men. Ex-prisoners, felons not in jail, they obviously have a hard time gaining employment. I should say that men who are in prison are neither in the labor force nor out of the labor force. They're just not counted in these numbers, so they would not be able to work, and so they're just kind of off the books. But if you're not in prison, you've been released, or you've been convicted of a felony and you're not behind bars, that dramatically reduces your chances of being in the labor force, and we can understand why. That's something like 1 in 8 men in this category, by the way, so it's not a trivial number. A third reason is the social safety net makes it possible for men not to work. So there's income coming in, disability, food stamps, what have you, that makes it possible for you to subsist without actually having a job. A fourth, and this is a bit of a surprise to me, is, here we go again, opioids. Opioids. One study showed that about half of men who were in this age category that were not in the labor force reported health problems. And about a third of those, or about a third of men out of the labor force, are on prescription painkillers. And the idea there being that, perhaps they're addicted to these prescription painkillers, and there's some kind of dysfunction associated with that. Also, we know that obesity and diabetes are on the rise, and that may make it more difficult for men to continue at work. Here's another interesting theory. 2 economists from MIT found strong evidence that men born into single-parent households were much more likely to be out of the labor force. So this sort of suggests a role model effect, if you will. If you were raised in a single-parent household, later on you're much more likely not to be working or even looking for work. Interestingly, that doesn't affect females much. So females who are raised in a single-parent household doesn't affect their labor force participation. So that might suggest that there's some kind of a lack of a role model, lack of a working father that has an impact. That latter explanation suggests that it's not just about economics, wages, and choices, but there's some social reasons. Almost certainly, there's less of a stigma attached today for men in that age group not to be working than when there used to be. So, when I was younger growing up in my college days, if you weren't working, if you were in that age group and you weren't working or you weren't looking for work, what's going on? Why aren't you doing that? There was a stigma attached to that. Not so much the case now. So even if the reason why men are less likely to work is that, well, they have lower skills and they have lower wages, that basically means that they would rather stay at home than accept these jobs with lower wages. That would not have been as acceptable 30, 40 years ago. You take what's available out there. It may not be what you want, but you got to get a job. That's not so much the case today. So what are the implications for the economy? Well, the economic costs of this withdrawal are very large, very significant. That is, if today's participation rate for males, instead of 88% or 97% like it was in the 50s, we would have 10 million more men with jobs. 10 million more men with jobs. That would be an enormous productivity boost and probably a good thing socially as well. Now, we couldn't say that if the possibility is, well, maybe these men who are out of the labor force are actually doing things productively in the home. We think about female labor force participation, that's usually what we're talking about. It's like, well, the choices between working at a job for pay or working at the home, child rearing, household work, which is productive, obviously, even though it doesn't show up on the book. So maybe it is the case that, you know, men are becoming more like women in that regard, and so they're withdrawing from the labor force. But the data doesn't suggest that. Time use surveys suggest that men are almost entirely idle when they're not in the labor force. That is, they are much less likely to do household work than unemployed men. They're less likely to care for family members than women who have jobs. And they are less likely to volunteer than either working women or unemployed men. So they're not doing household work, they're not caring for children or parents, nor are they volunteering. And then there is the social cost. And I'll quote Nicholas Eberstadt, again, the author of Men Without Work. The male retreat from the labor force has exacerbated family breakdown, promoted welfare dependence, and recast disability into an alternative lifestyle. Among these, the death of work seems to mean also the death of civic engagement, community participation, and volunteerism. So I want to thank you all for listening today. These are trends that it'll be worth following going forward, particularly what's happening with the gig economy. And I'm happy to, do we have any questions today, Taylor?
No, we didn't.
All right, well, very good. Thank you all for listening. Are we done?
We are.
All right, thanks everyone.